Alright guys, we're going to do section 3.2, which is very similar to 3.1, but we're going to learn the relationships between those angles that we just talked about. So let's first start that out. Alright, so these are some new postulates that we could use in proofs, and we're going to figure out what they are and then also give some examples. So first off, corresponding angles are congruent. So an example we can use here is angle 1 is congruent to angle 5. Those are corresponding angles. Remember, they have to be in the same location. Also, we can say angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. Alright, they match up. They're corresponding. Next, alternate interior angles are congruent. So, angles that are inside the two parallel lines and are across from each other, left and right, top and bottom. So, angle 4 is congruent to angle 5. We also have another set. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 8. Alright, alternate exterior angles are congruent. And so we have a set. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. Those are alternating exteriors, so left and right, top and bottom on the outside. And the other set we got is angle 2 is congruent to angle 7. Lastly, consecutive interior angles are, that's right, supplementary. Ooh, gotcha probably. So, they add up to equal 180. So what we can say is that the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 6 equals 180. We can also use the other set, the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180. So those are the only ones that are different. Everything else is congruent. Well, now that we know that, we can actually do some problems involving algebra. So suppose we have these three lines here, and we want to make sure that those lines are parallel. What would we have to do to solve them? Or what would x, y, and z have to equal to make those lines parallel? Well, what we need to do first, we always try to find out, is there an angle we know? Because once we know an angle measure, we can figure out every single other angle because of that. Well, unfortunately, we don't know any of the angle measures. So we want to look to see what angles have the same variable. That has a y, that has z, but these two have x's. So we're going to look at this angle and that angle. Well, they don't share any relationship. They're not alternating interior because they do alternate, but this is on the outside, that's on the inside. But what we could do is, since this angle here corresponds with this angle here, we could write this angle equals 4x minus 10. Now, if we look at that, those two angles together are a linear pair, so they have to equal 180. So 6x plus 20 plus 4x minus 10 equals 180. Now we just go through and use algebra to solve. Combine like terms, we get 10x plus 20 minus 10 gives us 10. So it equals 180. We'll subtract 10 from both sides, and 10x equals 170. And so that means x equals 17. Alright, so now that we know x equals 17, we're going to plug that back in. So 17 times 4, if you use a calculator, that tells you that is 68 minus 10. Means this angle here is 58 degrees. This angle here is 58 degrees because they're corresponding. Now, if we want to figure out this angle here, there's two ways. We can plug 17 in, or we can just take 180 minus 58 and get 122. Now that we know that, we can use that to help us figure out y and z. Well, let's see. Y, the 5y minus 2 corresponds with this angle here, or this angle. Both of them are alternating exterior angles, and those are congruent. And congruent we set equal to. So 5y minus 2 is set equal to 58. And so 5y we add 2 equals 60. And so y has to equal 12. Now to figure out z, we see what it corresponds with. 10z corresponds with 122. Those are corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent. So 10z equals 122. Divide by 10, z's got to equal 12.2. Okay, here's one involving a trapezoid, and we'll talk about this later on. Now if we look, we have a set of parallel lines. Actually, we have 3 parallel lines here, but we have 2 different transversals. This transversal has no relationship with this transversal here. So we can't make any statements with this angle and that angle because there's no relationship. They're on 2 different transversals. But there is a relationship between these two. If we look, the parallel lines, they're both inside and they follow each other. They form a C. Those are consecutive interior angles, so they add up to equal 180. So 4a plus 12 plus 120 equals 180. So 4a plus 132 equals 180. Subtract 4a equals 48. A's got to equal 12. So now that we know that, we can plug it back in. 4 times 12 is 48. Times 2 is 60. So this angle here is 60. Now what that's going to help us figure out, we can also plug it back into 5a plus 45. 5 times 12 is 60 plus 45. That is 105 degrees. Now that we know that, we can match it up with this one. Alright, so 180 minus 3b and 105, these are corresponding angles because they're both bottom left, they match up. Corresponding angles are congruent, so we set them equal to each other. So 180 minus 3b equals 105. Subtract 180, we get negative 3b equals negative, what is that, 95. And, wait, no, not 95. 75. And so when we divide by negative 3, the negatives cancel out and b equals 25. Okay, now, this next one. If I want to figure out angle 1 that's in between these 2 parallel lines, let's first try to figure out every angle we know. Well, we have a set of vertical angles, so this is 35 here. And we know we have linear angles, and so they have to add up to equal 180. So 180 minus 35 is 145. So this one's 145 as well. Going to the other side, we have a set of vertical angles here is 125. And 125, or 180 minus 125 gives us 55 for those 2 angles there. Alright, now, in order to figure out angle 1, there's no way to figure out just by looking at this, but what we are going to do is draw another parallel line here, because we won't be able to figure out angle 1, but we could find this angle here and that angle there and add them together. Now this top part of angle 1 corresponds with this side here, or this angle here, which is 35, and corresponding angles are congruent. So this top part is 35. The bottom part corresponds with this angle here, which is 55. Corresponding are congruent, so this is 55. So now angle 1 is 35 and 55 together, and so we add those. Oh, that makes a completely right angle. Angle 1 equals 90 degrees. Alright, if you're having some trouble with this, try to watch the video again and check over your notes. Ask a friend, and you can also see me for some help. Good luck on this section. Have fun.